I'm here at SharePoint Saturday Redmond with Bill Baer, a technical product manager with the SharePoint product team. And Bill, so why don't you give us a little information about what you shared in the keynote today?
So today we talked about the new SharePoint Diagnostics Studio, which we're releasing in the new SharePoint Administration Toolkit here in about a month. The SharePoint Diagnostics Studio, as we've seen today, is a tool that allows you to correlate and aggregate all of the information about a SharePoint farm and present it in a consistent user interface that can be used to identify problems, whether they're related to custom code or SharePoint itself.
So where did the product come from? What's the background?
So the SharePoint Diagnostics Studio originally started out as a developer tool here in Redmond that we used to identify bugs as we developed SharePoint.
Oh, was it something that was also used by MSIT with the internal deployments of SharePoint, or was it purely a product team effort?
Absolutely. So MSIT leveraged the SharePoint Diagnostics Studio as well, and they used it for the same reasons that our developers used it and the same reason that we'd like you to use it. What I wanted to announce today is how many people are familiar with the SharePoint Diagnostics Studio that we released in the SharePoint Administration Toolkit? Just a couple? Great. So this is going to be a change of pace. This is the evolution of that tool that we called SPDiag, and that's what we'd like to announce today. The tool's not yet been released. It's going to be part of an upcoming SharePoint Administration Toolkit, but I figured this would be a great opportunity to get to people and share it early, to give you some early insight into this tool, which is still about a month out. So let's talk about what the SharePoint Diagnostic Tool, or Studio, does. The first way to approach it is to think about the monitoring and diagnostic landscape. Today, from a SharePoint perspective, we generally focus on the SharePoint Health Analyzer, and then we use System Center Operations Manager. We use the SharePoint Health Analyzer to kind of get that preemptive look into what's going on in SharePoint by leveraging the health rules that we've built into the product. And then System Center Operation Manager helps notify us of problems as they occur, and then we can address them either through the Health Analyzer or through other means. Today, when there's an issue in SharePoint, how many people use Excel to grab ULS logs and copy all that information into it? How many people use Transact SQL queries against the usage database to try to collect information? How many people think it's difficult to aggregate all the information from the ULS logs across complex farms and put them into one consistent look? Okay, so this is going to be a good tool for you guys. Basically, what the SharePoint Diagnostics Studio does is it ties into the existing features, such as SCUM and the SharePoint Health Analyzer. So if we look at this wheel here, we've basically got System Center Operations Manager, or SCUM. That's what helps us monitor service status. We've also got the Health Analyzer, and that's what surfaces potential issues. So those are those predefined health rules that we built into the product. And then lastly, what we're introducing today is the SharePoint Diagnostics Studio, and we'll take a look at it here in a minute. And this is what provides us the advanced diagnostics to really be able to isolate issues. Whether you're a developer or an IT professional responsible for a SharePoint deployment, this is going to be useful in diagnosing and resolving issues. Basically, in a nutshell, it prevents server diagnostic information in a visual and structured way. And by a visual and structured way, we present graphs, we present charts, we present line graphs, and I'll give you an example of what this looks like. From a dev perspective, the new SharePoint Diagnostics Studio will surface every request across every machine remotely with minimal permissions. And that's the key to this tool, is the tool can be run on a client. You point it at a SharePoint farm, and it's going to aggregate all of that information across that SharePoint environment by collecting all the ULS logs from each server in the topology, by collecting information from the usage database, collecting information from the event viewer, and collecting performance counters off of all the machines that are part of your topology. What it then does is it collects and aggregates that information, and it presents it in a user interface that we'll look at. Out of the box, we're going to give you a bunch of reports with the SharePoint Diagnostics Studio. We're going to give you what we call our base reports, which are basically HTTP requests and Windows events that occur across the topology. We're going to give you capacity reports. We're going to give you performance reports, which are important to a lot of people. Availability reports is something that's key to understanding your availability in a SharePoint environment. You may be required to meet 3 nines, or 2 nines, or 4 nines. The challenge with that is how do you determine how many nines that you've actually met without going back and trying to aggregate a bunch of information and put it together to figure out what kind of SLA you've actually met with your SharePoint deployment. And then lastly, there's the usage reports that we built into the tool. We also built an integrated search engine into the tool. So everybody's probably familiar with the good SharePoint error page. And the error page, of course, in 2010, we've added the correlation ID. The correlation ID, again, this is where Excel comes in, and this is where the usage database comes in, and Transact SQL comes in, because a lot of people need to figure out, okay, I have a correlation ID. How do I map that to an issue that occurred in the environment? What we've built in the SharePoint Diagnostics Studio is a way to actually search for a correlation ID for a date and time when the event occurred, or for an actual impacted user. Then what we do is we grab all the reports, we aggregate them, and we let you know exactly what happened, whether it was related to a user, a correlation ID reported by that user, or a specific date and time. The reason that's important is because when something happens in SharePoint, typically the only information you're provided is when it happened. And the hard information to get to is the what and why. And that's what the SharePoint Diagnostics Studio is intended to address, the what and why. Now you know when, and we're going to help you find out what and why. We also built in what we call snapshotting, the ability to take reports offline, the ability to collect topology information, to build reports and take those reports offline, and then make them consumable. When you take a snapshot, again, it grabs a snapshot of the topology that you're working with. It also grabs the open reports, so you can select which reports you want to export out of our tool, and then it provides a summarization and it puts all of that in the file system. And again, remotely, on the client. It's basically a set of two components. There's a client application that you would use on a machine. It could be a laptop. You could put it on a front end, but the best bet is just to put it on a machine. And again, it requires minimal permission. And then there's a set of server extensions that get deployed. The server extensions get deployed at runtime when you execute the application, or server administrators can choose to deploy the actual solution package independently. But basically what it does is it provides a set of extended diagnostic providers, because our goal is to surface as much information as possible and then bring it down into the SharePoint Diagnostics Studio to make it as useful as possible. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. What we're looking at here is this is one of our HTTP Office farms, is what we call them here at Microsoft. And basically this is the farm we use across the SharePoint product group to maintain specifications and information about our product, whether it's in-market or future products. So what we're looking at right now is what we call OfficeNet 14, which is a SharePoint 2010 farm. Immediately when you open the tool, the first things you see is you see availability. Availability is calculated based on when you have scheduled your app domains to recycle. So that's the time window you scheduled your applications to recycle. And then what we look for is we look for crashes. Those are those unexpected application pool recycles. So what we surface here is we surface the scheduled recycles, and then we also have an availability report. As you can see right now, it's meeting 2 nines. But that's quick insight into what SLA you're actually meeting. The next report right here on the home page is the performance report. And as you can see, it's broken down into percentiles. In red, in kind of the yellowish color, what we see is we see the first and median quartile, and then we also see the third quartile, that's the 75th percentile, and then we see the 95th percentile. So it gives us a quick snapshot into availability. As you can see over here on the left, what we've done is we've provided additional reports to help you understand exactly what you're looking at. You can also zoom in on issues, and we'll show you that here in a minute. But one of the things that I wanted to show you, one of the reports is usage. One of the big things that we see is usage. Who's using the environment? What exactly are they doing? From this perspective, I can see this IP address has, in this time window that I've actually executed the report against, shows that there's been 8,472 requests. As I look at this, I want to understand what are they doing? Why are they touching my farm so often and so frequently? And as you can see, when I've selected this IP range, it's given me their activity. So I can see that PowerPoint and Word are the two big applications that they're using against my environment. So I can actually start to isolate issues by looking at user accounts and seeing what these user accounts are doing against my farm. Some of the other things that we can take a look at is latency. So I can double click on a latency report. And what it's going to do is it's going to go out, it's going to aggregate all the logs, all the performance counters, collect information about the usage DB, and it's going to present latency per server that's in my topology. So as you can see, I have 3 front-end servers here in my topology, and then it's going to break it down in a little heat map that I can quickly look at. I can see MossDog 2960 was one of the offending machines in terms of latency. So what I can do is I can quickly come in and filter. I can filter by a number of different things, but I can actually narrow down the scope to that specific machine and start to isolate the issue more effectively. I can also use the tool to zoom in on a specific range. So if I want to gain additional insight, it's as quick as just grabbing and extracting the information right there through the user interface. SQL deadlocks, that's another issue. If there's any DBAs in the audience, you want to know when SQL deadlocks are occurring or why they're occurring. As we can see in this window, we didn't have any, but it's a pretty short window. You can actually extend windows and then refresh and start to isolate issues that way. Again, another way that we've done things is by adding the integrated search. You can search for HTTP requests over a date and time period. You can search by correlation ID, or you can search by specific user.